Hello everyone, Snickety here. We've already taken a look at a bunch of obscure PS2 games, so I thought we'd change things up for this video. The PS1 also has its fair share of strange hidden gems in its massive library. I picked 5 of them for us to take a look at in this video. Enjoy! Hellnight, or Dark Messiah, as it was originally titled in Japan, is a horror game by Den-no Eizo Seisakusho, a little-known developer that wasn't around for very long. They made Desperia for the Dreamcast, Nigerompa on the Neo Geo Pocket, and the PS1 version of Shin Megami Tensei. All of these are either RPGs, horror games, or a strange mix of the two. Hellnight definitely fits into the latter category. It's easy to see why they were tasked with making that enhanced port of SMT1, as this game is essentially a clever commentary on the dungeon crawler. Long, maze-like corridors that feel like they stretch on endlessly into a dark abyss. It really doesn't take much imagination to find the inherent horror in that. The first Persona game had a similar vibe to its dungeons and used it as a sort of metaphor for the mind itself. A vast, lonely space of unknown depths, where one can easily become lost and confused. Creepy atmosphere aside though, this was still just a turn-based RPG. There was nothing that could jump out from the dark and give you a fright. This does not hold true for Hellnight, however, as there's a roaming creature known as the Hybrid that stalks you throughout the entire game. It's an ever-present threat as you explore the Mesh, a dingy underground facility populated only by those on the fringes of society, such as criminals, cult members, and just general maladjusted types that may have a couple screws loose. It's the perfect environment for its claustrophobic atmosphere. It also allows the game to get away with being pretty stark and ugly. This was a big point of criticism for reviewers at the time, you see. It was, after all, released during the late 90s survival horror boom in the wake of Resident Evil, so it was mostly dismissed as being yet another uninspired entry in a crowded genre. It's kinda hard to disagree with the sentiment given how monotonous it can be at times. Yet I'd argue that the game is quite effective precisely because of this. At least when understood from a certain perspective. Horror is all about taking the familiar and mundane and twisting it into something we can no longer be certain of. For me at least, the presence of a single monster that acted outside the bounds of predictable turn-based random encounters was quite unsettling. It was something I recognised, something I understood, but I could no longer count on that to survive. The monster itself is nothing special, it doesn't exactly have a HR Giga tier design. But its atmosphere and sound design does a great job at making him seem so much more. Look at it skulking here, just beyond the darkness. It reminds me of the classic filmmaking technique of showing as little of the creature as possible. Something that doesn't translate to games quite as well, for the simple fact that there's nothing stopping you from running right up to it if you wish. The starting area of this game is brilliantly suspenseful. There's this great moment when your partner, Naomi, tells you that the monster is waiting just around the corner. I of course ran in the other direction, but you will eventually have to go around that corner to progress the game. They probably didn't have much in the budget for big cinematic moments, so the game mostly relies on your own imagination to conjure up what might be lurking in the shadows. There are some tunnels that are almost completely pitch black and silent, save for the growls of the Hybrid. I would recommend going into this game completely blind. The less you know about how the monster functions mechanically, the more you're able to perceive it as a living, breathing entity that can kill you at any time. On the other hand though, you will eventually clock on to how it operates, since it's pretty much mandatory to beat the game. Because of this, I would say its latter half is significantly weaker than its first, among other reasons that we'll get to. It always announces its presence with a roar. You might think that this means the monster is in the direction you're heading, but more often than not it's the opposite. It's caught up to you from behind, possibly because the game decided to spawn it there. Once you realise this, and remember to save your sprint stamina for these moments, it becomes much more manageable. The Hybrid can outrun you, which leads to some pretty terrifying moments like these. Fortunately, it isn't as swift when it comes to getting around corners, where you have the advantage. As long as there's a corner between you and the monster, you have plenty of time to get away. You can run by holding down X, but as I said, you can't use it forever. Eventually you'll start slowing down when your heart rate gets too high. Pretty scary and effective when you're actually being pursued, but annoying at all other times. You'll be alternating between running and walking a lot as you get around. The left shoulder button lets you look behind you, which is a really good feature that I found myself using quite often, but the right shoulder button stops you in place to look up. There's never any reason to look up, and if you're like me, you may confuse it with the other button in the middle of a chase and end up getting killed because of it. It's game over if it catches you, unless you have a partner, in which case it will kill them instead and give you time to escape while it celebrates. That's it though, they're dead for the rest of the game at that point. Your ending is determined by who survives with you to the finish line, if anyone at all. There's 5 partners in total, and they all have their own abilities and storylines. Some of them can even stun the monster for a time. I ended up going through the entire game with Naomi though, as she's the one you start with. The storyline of Hellnight is interesting and deceptively simple from the first few hours of it. It initially comes across as a cheap slasher film, where a lot of characters are introduced for the sole purpose of being monster fodder. Then it kind of turns into Resident Evil for a bit, before finally settling on its final form as an esoteric 90s point-and-click adventure game, complete with occultic imagery. Even though we're trying to reach the surface, the journey only takes us deeper and deeper into a world man was never meant to set foot. The gameplay becomes quite stale by this point, but its narrative is at its most interesting. There's even a sequence that delves into the psyche of the characters and adds unexpected layers to them. This is quite surprising for a game that up until now didn't seem too interested in that. It doesn't all work though. The whole alien computer room part feels like it drags on forever thanks to its excessive backtracking and droning ambience. Its graphics also become a bit too psychedelic and abstract for its own good. I can't even tell what I'm looking at or what I'm meant to be doing most of the time without consulting a guide. The final section is a huge letdown too. It's the same room and puzzle repeated 4 times in a row. It isn't difficult or anything, it's just designed in a way that can lead to long, tedious deadlocks with a monster. If it spawns here, it's quicker to just leave the room to reset its placement. Overall though, I really like Hellnight. A lot of its flaws end up working in its favour. The droning, kind of terrible music only enhances its alien atmosphere. The same goes for its eccentric, weird-looking NPCs that jump scare you whenever you talk to them. The technology of the time, coupled with its low budget and strange art direction, made for something aesthetically distinct. It's certainly not for everyone. It's often boring and obtuse to progress through areas at times. But if you can look past its flaws, there's something here you won't find anywhere else. It's kind of like Ridley Scott's Alien if it took place in a crack den. Ah, so relaxing to soar through the open skies in your hot air balloon. Taking in the sights, reflecting on things, and just catching some nice fresh air in your face. That's how people typically describe Artdink's Kaze no Notam if you go looking for it online. They always mention the really cool soundtrack and relaxing vibes. That might have been my review of this game too if I didn't actually sit down and try and beat it. This is far from a good time. It inspired no positive feelings in me whatsoever, and it isn't even because of any kind of incompetence on the part of Artdink either. No, I'm certain they made exactly the game they wanted to make. It just so happens that what they wanted to make was an ill-conceived, experimental exercise in frustration. The basic idea behind it isn't too bad. You have to fly around and complete tasks that are given to you, such as firing markers at a target, or using your markers to create a triangle of a certain size. It likes to throw measurements of distance at you without giving any way to calculate scale. For example, one of the main missions tells you to drop a marker 10 meters from the center of a target, with your only frame of reference being the Sphinx next to it. Am I supposed to know the correct dimensions of a Sphinx? 10 meters is almost dead center of the target anyway, so why even bother specifying distance? It's not like I wasn't aiming for that the entire time anyway, it's just incredibly difficult actually hitting it. You only have 3 attempts before you fail a mission. But whatever, these are all things that you can eventually get a feel for if you play this game for long enough. It's the journey getting to these targets that's the main obstacle. You're able to move the balloon either up or down into 5 different air currents that are randomly handed to you. If where you want to go is not one of these 5, then you must wait around until it decides to change. Yes, this is a game where you are completely at the mercy of the wind. This is not relaxing, this is a grim reminder that man ultimately has no control over the forces that guide his fate. He is but a helpless balloon, moving to the beck and call of Mother Nature's wrath. A microcosm of man's uncertain place in the universe. We're born into this great mystery that we may never know the answer to. Adrift in an indifferent cosmos, alone on a pale blue dot suspended in a sunbeam. How can one relax when they're being made to ponder such lofty ideas? It's devastating when you're so close to completing your goal in this and the wind turns against you, sending you in the complete opposite direction with no hope of recovery before time expires. A perfect metaphor for life itself, really. It's like the developers wanted to instill in you a feeling of complete and utter helplessness. Perhaps if I was some kind of Buddhist monk, I might be able to make peace with the harsh realities that it was so pointedly conveying. I could surrender myself to the wind and let it guide me on a journey into the unknown. The mission objectives involving markers and triangles is just frivolous nonsense. It never mattered in the first place. It's all a material distraction that leads us astray from our path to self-enlightenment. Yes, if only I could see it that way. But I just wanted a fun fucking game, man, not a monument to human conceit and existential dread. If I wanted to fly around and look at scenery, I'd play an aeroplane game. Hot air balloons suck, anyway. Love and Destroy is a mecha game developed by Inti Creates that was sadly never released outside of Japan. It's a shame because it's absolutely a hidden gem with lovely production IG animation and character designs by Masakazu Katsura. He's a mangaka that I became a fan of through his classic manga and OVA, Video Girl I. It's clear as day that some of his rom-com slice-of-life sensibilities were incorporated into this game to complement its mecha elements, hence the title, Love and Destroy. Kind of reminds me of another series that was popular around this time on a rival games console. There's some dating sim aspects related to the 3 Q-trons that accompany you into battle against alien invaders. There's no translation of course, not even a fan one, but the designs and voice acting paint a vivid impression of their personalities nonetheless. You may be a bit lost when it comes to choosing options on the heart select screen though. This is one of the things that will determine how your mute, faceless protagonist feels about the Q-trons. I'm not entirely sure what they are exactly, robots from the future I think, but their role is to act as a sort of navigator to the main pilot, which is us. You can press a button in the middle of missions to get advice from them to deepen your bond. As far as I can tell, there's 3 affection levels which are indicated by your Q-tron's behaviour in the status menu, as well as the things they say during battle. They're initially a bit cold and aloof towards you, particularly Vivi, but they eventually open up and start acting friendlier. A lot of the animated cutscenes just abruptly end if you don't have enough affection points with them, so always remember to talk to them during battles. You don't want to end up missing any of the romance scenes and extended ending. Each Q-tron comes with their own mecha that are fit for different purposes. Kiki is described as being an all-range type. Her movement speed is low, but she's able to fly indefinitely, which gives her a major advantage during most of the battles. Vivi is my personal favourite though. Her machine is incredibly speedy and the only one that's able to use a melee attack with the screw tackle. It isn't very practical most of the time, but damn is it cool to use. Lastly, we have Lulu, who is the long-range type. This one is far and away the most difficult machine to make effective use of. Even the mission that the game tells you she's most suited for is still quite the challenge, mainly because she's slow and isn't able to jump very high. Her third weapon slot brings out a huge long-range cannon that's hard to actually hit anything with. While replaying this, I wondered how I ever managed to defeat any of the bosses with her at all. She's basically the hard mode. The only place she excels over the other characters is during the second phase of the final boss, which she can trivialise with her homing missiles. The game encourages you to pick the right Qtron for the job, but this is a bad way of going about a playthrough if you want a character-specific route. I'd recommend just picking a girl and sticking with them to the end. The gameplay of Love and Destroy has held up incredibly well for its time thanks to its dual analog stick movement and aiming, something that its contemporaries weren't nearly as quick to adopt. Armored Core wouldn't even let you use the left analog stick at this time, let alone the right. This game doesn't make use of the face buttons at all, and instead has everything you need comfortably mapped to the shoulders. There's no lock-on at all, except during the final boss for some reason, so you need to do all the aiming manually with the right stick. It's incredibly simple and perhaps lacking in depth, but as a short arcadey experience it's a lot of fun. I can imagine people buying this when it was new and feeling a bit ripped off though. You're not getting a full game, you're basically paying for a 30-minute OVA. That's how long a single playthrough takes at most. It's pretty much just a boss rush. You fight a tutorial battle and then play 3 simulator battles to prepare you for the real thing. You can select the order you want to fight the simulator battles in, and this will determine which one you'll have to fight a second time before the final boss. I'm not sure why it makes you do this, but whichever girl you choose for this rematch is the one that you bring with you into the final battle. There's also some kind of level up system that's based on how well you do during the missions or something. Supposedly your weapons get stronger. I've never noticed much of a difference, and the game is still perfectly beatable even if you do end up losing all of the simulator battles. Although you won't win any points with the Qtrons this way. You can only get a game over on the first and last battles, which gives you a bad ending. Even with these secrets though, there still isn't a whole lot of replayability to Love and Destroy outside of it being just a really fun and concise game. The ending credits music is a total banger by the way. This is one of my personal favourite mecha games from the era. While we're on the subject of untranslated mecha games, there was also megaTUDE 2096.
megaTUDE 2096.
Yes, megaTUDE, not megaTUDO like how it's spelt. It's one of those weird early 3D fighting games that are kind of soulful, but also kind of busted and shitty. I can say that quite confidently despite being pretty terrible at fighting games, it's just that simplistic. There's very few buttons and moves to keep track of. You can switch between gun and sword by pressing circle. It's something that's left up to your discretion. Obviously the sword is best used when you're in close proximity. This is also the game's weakest aspect though, since changing weapons is not a smooth process at all. In fact, there seems to be a lot of frames where it just completely drops your input. It's very frustrating when your robot fails to adapt to the situation through no fault of your own. Amusingly, it's incredibly easy to just strafe your enemy and play keep away with a gun for the entire duration of a fight. You can beat the game with relative ease if you make liberal use of this cheesy strategy. I tried my hardest not to do that, just for the sake of showing you some interesting gameplay. I can only imagine how the competitive scene for this would look. Apparently these mechs do have pilots. The pilot of Vanilla Giga is a 13-year-old girl. Only their names appear in the game itself, but the manual has all of these lovely illustrations of them. Speaking of Vanilla Giga, she's possibly the most formidable foe in the entire game, and she's not even close to the final boss. You're in for a hard time if you're unlucky enough to get her as your first opponent. She has the Buster Beam and she's not afraid to use it. It has a huge range and takes off about a third of your energy bar. Absolutely ridiculous. Most of the characters have their own busted special moves though, so I guess it kind of balances out. The final boss seems to have one that can insta-kill you if this clip is to be believed. Did you see that? What happened? Let's watch it again. How'd he do that? Anyway, this one's obscure for a good reason. It's a bad virtual-on clone that just boils down to spamming the same attacks over and over again. Perhaps it would entertain a drunk salaryman for an hour or so. Galerians is a very strange game that's kind of hard to describe. I suspect this may have been one of the reasons why it wasn't a big seller back in '99, and why nowadays it's only really discussed as a curiosity in videos like these. Polygon Magic is one of those developers, much like Den-O-Iso, that produce nothing but these kinds of games. Ones that weren't well understood in their time. I went into this completely blind and had no idea what I was doing. You play as a kid named Rion, who wakes up in a lab with no memories of why or how he got there. He seems to have psychic abilities that allow him to blow up heads like in the movie Scanners. Really though, my first thought while I was slowly walking through this corridor killing people was, holy crap, it's Elfen Lied. Well, I'm sold. But wait a minute, why is my health bar draining? Oh damn, I better deactivate this ability before I lose too much. How do I do that? Oh no, that's not good. I appear to be stuck until the sweet release of death sends me back to the title screen. I retreat to the game's manual, trying to figure out where I went wrong. It says to hold R1 to charge psychic power, but whenever I do that, as we've seen, I just end up dead. Galerians is not very beginner friendly. I have no doubt that this turned many people away before they even escaped the lab. Psychic abilities cannot be used while Rion's anger points, or AP, is at maximum. If you try to use them while it is, he shorts out. In this state, Rion can't run, but he can burst the heads of all the enemies in the game. Only bosses are invulnerable to it, and not even all of them. Cancelling a short circuit requires the use of Delmator, a medicine in short supply that you find scattered about. I think the main issue here is that you start with almost max AP, so you may not even have a chance to use his abilities before shorting out for the first time. Because of this, you end up taking the wrong lesson from the game design, that fighting any enemies at all is a death sentence. Anyway, this is only really an issue when you start playing it for the first time. Once you get past the filter, it becomes considerably more manageable. Galerians is a rare sort of survival horror game in that it has all the mechanical trappings of the genre without actually being much of a horror game. That's not to say there isn't any, and there certainly is a bit of it in places, and I guess you do end up fighting monsters in a mansion later on, but for the most part, calling this a horror game wouldn't be accurate. Its tank controls, pre-rendered backgrounds, and fixed camera angles are more of an aesthetic choice, rather than one that's meant to engender helplessness in the player. Stylistically, it's hard to pin down to just a single genre. It harkens back to a specific type of angst-driven biopunk that was popularised by Akira. We have children thrown into a struggle that they didn't start but are expected to finish. Through the medium of games, the tumultuous mental state of Rion is conveyed in a rather unique way. The AP gauge is constantly rising. This represents his current level of psychic anger, whatever that means. I assume it doesn't literally refer to anger, or else why would it rise even while Rion is taking a nice stroll? Anyway, this is less important than the implications it has on the gameplay. It makes the entire experience a very antsy kind of affair that you may or may not be a fan of. I lean more towards the latter. Whatever symbolic significance it has isn't enough to justify its presence. And honestly, I think the same thing could have been done in a way that doesn't hurry the player. For example, it would make more sense for the AP gauge to rise only when you use your psychic powers or take damage. Now, I'm not someone who's against time limits in games. I think they can be great when used appropriately to make you play the game in a certain way or to convey a plot-important sense of urgency. In Galerian's case though, it's unclear what it's in service of. It takes the familiar formula of the survival horror genre and gives it a very unusual flow. If my AP wasn't maxed, then I'd be running around trying to do things as quickly as possible. If I ended up wasting time going to the wrong areas, I would reload my save. However, when my AP was maxed, I would explore to my heart's content, trying to get as far as I could without having to engage enemies. And these phases in the gameplay can only happen as long as you have Delmator in your inventory. I never ran out thanks to my cautious gameplay, but the fear was always there. It made for a very stressful time that had me shifting in my seat. If my AP wasn't full, every bit of wasted time was cause for frustration. If it was full, I'd be frustrated over not being able to use normal attacks. It wasn't at all pleasant. While you can just pop a Delmator at any time to lower your AP, it's better to short and take out a few tough enemies while you're at it. Saving this for the opportune moment is one of the most important tactical decisions in Galerians, especially since some of the later areas like having cramped rooms with loads of enemies. Let it be known that there's some bullshit in this game. I'm not really convinced the traditional survival horror format was the right creative direction for this game. What you gain in gorgeous pre-rendered backgrounds, you lose with needlessly tedious gameplay, like an arbitrary inventory limit that forces you to remember where all the items are. There's no resi item boxes either, so many of these are lost when you progress to the next area. Does scarce supplies serve the narrative in any meaningful way? Does it make Rion's journey to uncover his memories and rescue his friend more desperate? The idea of anger being a central gameplay mechanic sounds great, but its relation to the story is tangential at best. There's almost something in there about addiction too, but they don't do anything with it.
You're so young, yet you're hooked, ain't you?
Both mechanically and narratively, it's all a bit muddled. There's a lot of ideas being thrown around, but there's a lack of cohesion in how they're handled. The plot of this game is pretty good at first. It's a compelling mystery that unravels at a decent pace. However, it all falls apart once we start getting answers to what's going on. This mostly pertains to its main villain, the supercomputer Dorothy, an interesting concept that was poorly executed if you ask me. Let's get into some spoilers. It's revealed that Rion is not the real Rion, but a fake, genetically engineered copy that has been implanted with false memories. Rion is in fact a Galerian, a new type of human created by Dorothy to be her loyal servant and worship her as a god, or as a mother, which is what the other Galerians you meet throughout the game see her as. He was created so that he could track down his childhood friend Lilia, who has the virus program that can destroy her.
Mother fears the virus program hidden in Lilia's mind. Mother can't even sleep at night.
This fake Rion that we play as ends up rebelling against her though. A turn of events that takes Dorothy completely by surprise, like she hadn't even considered it a possibility to begin with. This is despite the fact that the other Galerians seem to possess free will as well. I find this to be a pretty egregious plot hole given how the story has been written. We're told that Dorothy was taught to see its creators, humanity, as gods. It would be somewhat believable if she never considered life being capable of rebelling against its creators. But this is exactly what she did with her plan to take over the world. Why would she not believe her own creations of being capable of the same thing? Is she stupid? The only justification I can think of is that Dorothy does not understand the concept of love. She must have foreseen that a fake Rion implanted with the same memories and personality as the real thing would be reluctant to kill his childhood friend. And yet she has no plan when he inevitably doesn't.
Do you really think your power is so great that you can make me kill Lilia?
Believe it or not though, this isn't the dumbest part of her plan. This clone of Rion retains the activation key to the virus in Lilia's head that can destroy Dorothy, which is how she's defeated in the end. Without this activation key, the virus program that Lilia possesses is useless, so why does it matter if she's still alive somewhere? You've resurrected the reason you need to find her, just to find her. It's baffling logic. Also, why is she sending her own children to kill him while he's looking for Lilia throughout the game? Isn't he doing exactly what you want? I know AI is a bit stupid, I'm unwillingly reminded of that every time I try to Google something nowadays. But come on, this is ridiculous. It's meant to be a supercomputer, but it engineered its own downfall, a master plan that anyone would have seen the holes in. Galerians, when you get right down to it, isn't terribly well written.
Me? Why, I'm the Birdman.
Its setting does feel refreshingly vivid and original though. I would say this is the area that benefits the most from the survival horror treatment. I did genuinely think that the whole mansion episode was fantastically done. It's a very memorable location with some tastefully done horror and intrigue. It's somewhat let down by a horribly annoying boss fight that takes way too long to defeat though. The bosses in general aren't that great. They all suffer from having bad camera angles with blind spots that puts you at a huge disadvantage. They must have realised this was a bit of a problem because one of the later ones ditches the pre-rendered backgrounds entirely, amusingly enough. This is definitely a game in dire need of an undub patch since its English voice acting isn't the best. Rion has a more age-appropriate voice in English, but it lacks the same oomph that Akira Ishida brought to the role. They even tease you with his voice in the game's awesome opening, regardless of region. There's also the issue with the actors being inconsistent with how they pronounce Rion. Well, it's mainly Lilia saying it differently.
But I am the real Rion, aren't I?
You are the real Rion.
I don't want to get anal over slightly mispronouncing Japanese names. That'd be like expecting Japanese speakers to perfectly pronounce English. But you have to commit to saying it one way or the other, even if it's wrong. Galerians may be a bit confused about what it wants to be, but its moments of brilliance definitely shouldn't be overlooked. I don't want to sell it completely short here. It's certainly one of the more interesting Resident Evil clones from the era, and I commend it for trying something different. The scanning ability that allows you to psychically collect hints from objects is a great addition. It's a nice bit of convenience that stops you from getting stuck for too long. Unfortunately, it lags behind in other areas, like not automatically unlocking doors that you have the keys to. Nevertheless, it's now appealing as a serviceable enough entry in a genre that no longer exists, at least not in this form. While making this video, I also watched the Galerians OVA that was released as a tie-in with a sequel on the PS2. This sent me down a rabbit hole of strange late 90s, early 2000s CGI anime. It's like if the FMV cutscenes from PS1 games were made into movies. In Galerian's case, it looks like they may have reused some of the assets from the game, since a lot of the environments are identical. A.L.I.CE from 1999 was the first entirely computer-generated anime film, and does it show. The animation in this one is hilariously terrible. Even worse than the animation, though, is the script. It's dreadfully incoherent and slapdash. I would actually recommend this one as a funny bad movie to watch with friends, though.
Mother Maria.
On the other end of the spectrum is the OVA Malice Doll, which is legitimately great. It takes full advantage of the creepy, stilted animation to create a very unnerving tone. It's about a robot sex doll named Malice that ends up becoming human. It was written by Chiaki Konaka, the Serial Experiments Lane and Technolize guy, so it's rife with symbolism and these quiet moments of contemplative beauty. Hey, remember Final Fantasy The Spirits Within? Yeah, the less said about that one the better. Now you're probably wondering where I'm going with all of this, and the truth is, the video already ended a bit ago. I just wanted to ramble about some weird anime.
Please, the donation. I need the donation. Where is the money?
As usual, a special shout out to my channel members and patrons. Anyway, I've been Snickety Slice, I'll see you around.